Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. And oh my, is that a clunky title. But that's alright. This is as much about the original releases of these games as it is about the Definitive Editions. The games in question being Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. None of which I actually played anywhere close to their original release, although one of them I did buy, but there's a story behind that. And we'll get to that. My first experience with playing any of these games was in 2010. After having played Grand Theft Auto 4 on the PlayStation 3, I wanted more, and I saw the PC version of the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy on clearance at Walmart, and I bought it and played through the games in order at that time. And truthfully, it made me wish that I would have played these games sooner. But anyway, on to Grand Theft Auto 3. Which was a game I was extremely dismissive of back in 2001. I had played Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, and saw them as fun time wasters, but I didn't see much to be gained from bringing this concept into 3D. And I will admit, I was very, very wrong in my assessment, as Grand Theft Auto 3 is a very different game from the first two. It has a lot of options of things to do, between of course doing missions, finding hidden packages, doing rampages, doing the optional street races, or just going around and getting a high wanted level to just see how long you'll last. And its lack of a map in the original version really made you have to learn the city, because that mini-map is not good for much. And in their original forms, I think this was the hardest of the three. Now that's completely different in the Definitive Edition, because when you have modernized controls and a map, Grand Theft Auto 3 suddenly becomes a much easier affair. But no matter which version of Grand Theft Auto 3 you play, it is a little weird how easily these various criminals grow to trust Claude. You just do a few missions, and suddenly you're talking to the boss of the family in the first part of the game. I mean, sure, he turns on you just as quickly. And then you find yourself working for the Yakuza. No, not Sega's version of Grand Theft Auto. And after very little effort is put in on your part, the Yakuza trust you completely, and are apparently completely oblivious to the fact that you actually started the gang war they're currently in. But Grand Theft Auto 3 was a simpler game than what would come later. The characters are more caricatures, the missions are all very straightforward, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of greater story or moral lesson to be learned. You are Claude, a silent protagonist and career criminal. And at the end of the game, nothing has really changed about that. And technically speaking, Grand Theft Auto 3 is the last point in the Grand Theft Auto universe that these three games all share. So we never really find out what happened to Claude after the events of this game, or what lasting repercussions his actions within Liberty City might have had, as both Vice City and San Andreas are in fact prequels. Speaking of Vice City, it takes place in 1986, and it does have a lot of fun with the fact that it's taking place in the 80s. You play as Tommy Vercetti, voiced by Ray Liotta. Tommy is part of a mob family from Liberty City, not the Leone crime family that Claude did some missions for. Tommy is instead affiliated with the Forelli crime family. Tommy just got finished doing some time in jail. And at first he's in Vice City to do a deal for the Forellis, but after that goes poorly, Tommy is effectively in business for himself. And I do mean business literally, as you can buy businesses all across Vice City. And after you do whatever's available to be done at that business, it starts making money for you. Unfortunately, that money is capped at 1 day's worth, and you have to manually go and collect it. But that's really not much of a problem, as the map is not that large, so doing a circuit of all your businesses isn't too hard after every couple of missions. Speaking of missions, they are much more involved than they were in GTA 3. In fact, everything here is more involved than GTA 3. Which, given there was only 1 year between the original release of 3 and Vice City, that's quite impressive. And Tommy is definitely more of a character than Claude. For one, he isn't silent. They do make the most out of Ray Liotta being his voice actor. But there is a little bit of disconnect with his character, as in cutscenes, you can tell he's someone who's very much done with everyone else's nonsense. but then the cutscene ends and you go and do whatever nonsense that person needed. At the end of the game, the Forellis come to collect their cut from Tommy, and as Tommy has essentially single-handedly taken over the city, he's not inclined to give anyone a cut of his money. So the last mission of this game is a lovely recreation of the end of Scarface. Only it goes considerably better for Tommy and the city is his. And that's really not much of a surprise, as the game is littered with references to Scarface and other movies and TV from the 80s. So much so that when they actually did make a Scarface game a few years after this, it just seemed like a worse version of Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And Tommy's story doesn't actually end in Vice City. In the next game, we do get a few hints of what happened to him. Apparently, he had a falling out with his lawyer, but is still very much in charge of Vice City a few years later. Tommy did have the option to change his clothes in this game, which was nice. I just wish you could have changed your clothes at a central location instead of having to go all over the map to get different outfits when you wanted them. But, moving on. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Taking place in fake LA, circa 1992. And I mentioned earlier I didn't play any of these games at the time of release. But there was one I did buy the day it came out, and that was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I worked at Walmart at the time, and a friend of mine from high school worked there with me. He just wanted to see the game, so I went over to his place after I had bought it on launch day. And he starts playing it, and in front of me and some of our other friends, he has a full-on meltdown when I'm going to leave with the game, begging me to let him keep it just for the night and he'll give it back to me at work tomorrow. He just wants to play it a little more. Keep in mind, we're talking about an adult having a full-blown tantrum to keep this game. And against my better judgment, I say, fine, but you better give it back to me tomorrow. He didn't. In fact, he kept it for the next 6 months, because whenever anyone went over to his place, he would hide it. And he would have just kept it indefinitely, but a mutual friend of ours was at his place and just happened to stumble across the hiding spot when he was looking for something else. So he called me to let me know this, and I went right over to pick it up. And as I'm trying to get my own game back, that I paid full price for on day one, he's throwing a second tantrum that I need to bring it right back after a week because he wants to still 100% it. At which point, I was completely done with him. And I made very clear he was never touching any game I owned ever again. He would go on to lie on his resume and get hired at Blizzard. But even after getting the game back, I didn't have much of a chance to ever play it. I had moved on to other games, and there was work and other things to deal with at the time. And really, I wish I would have played this game when it came out in 2004, as this was a very impressive game for 2004. As firstly, the map is much larger than the last two Grand Theft Auto games. As mentioned earlier, the game starts out in Los Santos, which is just fake LA. And at first it seems to be lower stakes compared to the last two games, as there is no mafia connection right at the beginning. Our main character CJ is part of a gang, and the early on missions deal with things that are fairly low stakes in the grand scheme of things. Not to say some of these missions aren't impressive, it's just when you reflect on the scale of crime you're committing, it seems like small potatoes. And not all missions are with your gang. You're also doing missions for a corrupt police officer, played by Samuel L. Jackson. And it's made very clear in your interactions with Officer Tenpenny that he is the real root of most of the problems in Los Santos. Before too long, you find yourself cast out of Los Santos, and you're greeted with a very large map, and you will eventually get to 2 more major cities you will explore, San Fierro and Las Venturas. But there's a lot more space in the map than just the 3 cities. And while some of it does have some interesting things to see, very little of it is all that important. So unfortunately, much of this vast map is just sort of empty space. And it will also make you dread doing missions that don't take place within the cities. Because if a mission has you go to some random spot in the empty void, that means there's an extra 8 minutes of driving tacked onto the mission. And assuming the mission ends out in the void somewhere, that just means you're going to have to do a lot more driving to get to the next mission to start it. This is a case where really a fast travel system of some kind would have helped. It's also a little strange how things escalate in this game. As I said, it starts out with you doing things for a street gang, but then after you leave Los Santos, you start having the opportunity to buy businesses, similar to Vice City, which thankfully can accrue more than one day's worth of money before you collect it this time. But then, at a certain point, things sort of go off the rails. CJ starts working for a mysterious government agency, and has to steal a Harrier jet, and gets access to a jetpack that he can fly around the map with. And that seems a little silly, but things clearly have gone past the street gang days. But then, you pick up your brother from jail, and you're right back to doing the minor street gang stuff. And this seems like an odd choice, because once you introduce Harrier jets and jetpacks, it's a little hard to go back to fighting a gang war. Especially considering that you just robbed a casino in story. It seems like you have very little to gain from going back to the hood. But apparently this is what Sweet, CJ's brother, thinks is more important. And honestly, it makes me think Sweet is the real antagonist of this story. Because yeah, Big Smoke and Officer Tenpenny are terrible people, but at least they got some kind of greater goal in mind. Meanwhile, CJ has set up both legitimate and illegitimate businesses in 2 cities, worked with a shady government organization to help get his brother out of jail, and then, when he's picking up his brother from jail, all Sweet can do is yell at CJ for not doing enough. And for some reason, CJ goes along with it. CJ should slap his brother and be like, no, we're not going back to the hood where people want to kill us. Or better yet, he should get back on the phone with Mike Torino and be like, you know, send Sweet back to prison. I'm done with him. But moving on from that source of frustration, this game had even more optional content than the other games, as there are street races, and rampages, and collectibles to get in every city. But there's more than that this time around. There are optional businesses for CJ to take over. There are NPCs you can take out on dates if you're so inclined. You can take particular kinds of vans to do house robberies if you want to. You can spend a lot of time taking over territory for your gang, and spend your days getting fast food and then working off that fast food in the gym. It's a lot of pseudo life sim elements, and I'm not really sure how much any of them add to the actual experience. And your character actually has stats this time around that you can manipulate. You can become more skilled with particular weapons, become stronger through working out at the gym, and gain stamina and maximum health. But the only parts of this that I ever found compelling were the parts that actually affected gameplay. I'm not sure why you would go out on fake dates in a video game, and you don't really get enough money from robbing houses to make it worthwhile. And unlocking the optional businesses got pretty repetitive for the most part. But it's nice to know that all of that is there if you want it. I just happen to not particularly want most of it. And that's nothing against the game, it's a wonderful game. It just has certain mechanics I don't care about. Overall, I think all of these games are very much worth your time to play. And I do think this is the kind of games where you should definitely play them in order of release, as each game definitely built upon the last game. As Grand Theft Auto 3 seems great the first time you go through, but if you try to play it having already played Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, it seems like a very limited experience at that point. And it's very strange to think that there was only a 3-year gap between those games. And in a lot of ways, these games are still more relevant to pop culture than later games in the Grand Theft Auto series, as it's not uncommon for people to reference Vice City and San Andreas, but you virtually never hear a Grand Theft Auto 4 reference anywhere. Maybe we'll talk about Grand Theft Auto 4 sometime. But that has been Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.
That's all. It's cool. Don't need to put a bullet in him. He killed himself in a traffic accident. No one to blame.